Thanks for coming. My name's John Bonning. I'm the Commercial Director here at the Building Centre. Just before we get going, as always, quick bit of housekeeping. Please can you check your mobile phones are on silent. And there's no fire drills planned for tonight, so should you hear a continuous ringing, please leave the room the way you came in, and the Building Centre team will escort you out the building. So thanks for coming along to what is our fifth event of this Retrofit 24 series. Hopefully you've had a chance to look around the exhibition upstairs. The programme this year, last year it was focused on residential retrofitting. This year it is on commercial, cultural and civic buildings. It's estimated that there's 1.9 million properties in the UK that need to be retrofitted if we're going to hit net zero by 2050. And as I've said in a couple of the other previous talks, that actually equates to retrofitting in excess of 1,100 properties per week from now to 2050. And I think, as most of us know in the room, that's not happening. So the challenge is absolutely huge. Tonight's talk has been facilitated by Innovate UK as one of our headline supporters of Retrofit 24. It looks at the use of data in order to understand how a building is performing, how it can be improved. And the importance of data also is with actually learning from it and sharing. Collaboration and the sharing information for achieving retrofit is very important. So we can't overemphasize the importance of data analysis and use. We have got a continuing programme that runs through to the end of this exhibition, which is the end of August. Do keep an eye on our website, buildingcentre.co.uk. All the programmes are being uploaded onto there. So we've got talks looking at how we deal with heritage buildings, the use of natural materials for retrofitting, schools and much more. There's online webinars on a Tuesday, in-person talks like this one either on a Wednesday or Thursday night, and we've got a number of walking tours that are taking place as well. So do keep an eye out on what's going on. I'd like to thank our speakers tonight. I'm going to hand you over very shortly to the host and chair for tonight for giving up their time. It is greatly appreciated. And with that, I will hand you over to Dr. Laura Morgan Forster, who is the Innovation Lead Net Zero for Innovate UK. Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you, John. Thank you, John, and thank you for everyone who's come here. Last year I was really impressed by Retrofit 23 and was delighted that we were able to support this year's version of the events programme, especially because in the preview information that was on the website, it mentioned data, which is everything that I seem to do at the moment. So I wanted to start with a very brief history of building performance evaluation. And by building performance, I'm thinking of how easy it is to provide the energy to a building, to make it comfortable, and also the nature of that comfort, what the indoor environment is like. At the beginning of this century, researchers, academics were starting to look at buildings and seeing if they were doing what we were expecting them to do. And it became apparent that they weren't always as they had been designed, as they'd been modelled. So by 2012, by 2010, there was clear evidence, and in fact, Innovate UK, shortly after that, were funding a programme of work that looked at the building performance of both domestic and non-domestic buildings. And it was evident that there was a significant, what's called the performance gap, the difference between the intended performance of the building and the performance of that building as built. By 2017, I was working for the Building Performance Network, and we were really promoting the use of building performance evaluation to try and close that performance gap to understand what was going on. It was obviously really important that if we were relying on models to make decisions about our buildings and also about our national policy and infrastructure, that we knew actually what was really going on in those buildings. But since then, it became apparent that there was more and more data available and more opportunities to use it. So not only could we improve the performance, but we could also understand better the performance and, for example, unlock finance because we knew what the return on investment was going to be. So there was a time, I think, when building performance evaluation was really seen as an academic activity. The process was often very disruptive and took a lot of time and was quite involved. But with more sensors becoming available and more cheaply, data is more readily available. But there are still things that we need to do. So in the net zero heat team at Innovate UK, we're really focused on this data-driven decarbonisation. And I just wanted to give you a snapshot of some of the projects that we're funding. So one of our competitions was the rapid assessment of building fabric performance. And there's a couple of examples here. So we wanted to have projects that were going to make data about a building more easily accessible. So measurements could be repeated. We could understand a building through the process, whether it was a new build or retrofit. So one example of this is a company called Traco. They have a device. They took technology that was being used on ships to detect leaks, and they adapted it to be used in buildings. And they're doing further work to make it more widely usable. Another company, Kestrix, they're using thermal images from quite a large scale, but with AI, they're able to interpret that data and make performance data more readily available. And that can then inform retrofit decisions. Another of our projects is with Trustmark Research and Innovation, and this is about getting condition data. This is the output from a vehicle, a Tesla, that drives around with various scanning equipment, and it's able to identify both indicators of performance, but more importantly, the condition of the building and the different elements. And one of our other competitions was focused on decision-making tools. And there's an example of it here from Quantico, bringing together data, being able to provide pathways for decarbonisation, and then learning from that process and learning from the output of the actualisation of those decisions, and then being able to take data, feeding it back, and continuing to learn. But we're going to hear about more about that project, and also another project that's been looking at the whole process of retrofit, but is also data-driven. So I think I'm going to go back to our speakers. So we're going to hear from John Abbott, who's Director of Retrofit at Keegan's. Then Balash will talk to us about innovation and net zero from DG City's point of view. Then we have Matthew Patton, who is from BEST, which is the Built Environment Smarter Transition. Did I get that wrong? Transformation, sorry. And Matthew's on a project team from one of the projects that we're funding just now. And then finally, we're going to hear from Anisha, who is another one of our funded projects. So I'll hand over to John.
I just need to work this out.
You can also do the arrows on the keyboard.
Okay. I'm going to have to go through.
Just keep going. One more.
Oops. Okay, sorry about that. So, yep, hello to everybody. My name's John Abbott from Keegan's. We are a multidisciplinary surveying company. We do a lot of various different things, fire risk assessments, cladding, clerk of works. We also have a sister company, ECD, who are architects, and we work very closely with them on retrofit, which we've been our team has been developed really in the last 3 years, although we have been working on retrofit projects for several years. But it's really since the sort of development of PAS 2035 that we've formed quite a unique team. As you can see, we've, on the domestic side, we've produced quite a lot of assessments, coordination, and lodging to Trustmark. We're now upskilling and getting ready for PAS 2038, which is the equivalent standard for commercial buildings. Although it came out last year, it really hasn't been developed yet, so that there's not the backup that we've got for the PAS 2035 yet, with Elmhurst and various other providers. Although hopefully we're going to develop that as we go. So data in any projects we do is absolutely vital, whether it is for domestic or commercial. And what we found is, there's two things really. If we don't do the investigation into the properties and find out, what they're about, we tend to find that, it really does, impact on the way we're carrying out the job. The more information you have up front, the better. So for the commercial buildings, we will send like a questionnaire to the owners to try and get more information for like heating, lighting, age of the building, etc. For the domestic, what we tend to do is like archetyping. So we'll go through and look at the properties and see where there's similarities and where there could be issues that when it comes to doing the designs, etc. We can find shortcuts by identifying these sort of things. So as I said, for PAS 2035, really everything's established. PAS 2038, scheme operators like Elmhurst at ECMK are yet to develop the software and backup so that we can, actually, carry out condition surveys and assessments as we're doing under the domestic. So currently what we would do is do a commercial EPC and use the software that we've got against the that's set up for the PAS 2035. So that tends to be a condition report going into every room, taking photographs of the condition of every element, measuring windows, doing a floor plan. Occupancy is not really the same for the commercial, but obviously it's we need to know more about the M&E heating and windows, etc., and lighting. So what we do, for the commercial, it gets zoned depending on various different aspects. So yeah, and these are just forms that we would be filling in. As I said, they're really based on the domestic, but there's no equivalent at this time for the commercial. And I think really the thing for us is once we've got this information, this data, again, it's really set up to model that property. You get the baseline from whatever you're collecting, which gives you the EPC, commercial EPC. From that baseline, in RDSAP, we model it through software called Design SAP. So we model each measure that we think is going to be good for that building, whether that's, external wall insulation, new heating, etc. That then produces information of how that will affect the sat rating, the CO2, and the costs, etc. So at the moment, the way we're having to deal with that for the commercial, because there's no software that, from the providers, is we're having to sort of rerun the commercial EPC with different measures to see how that comes back. One of the things, I mentioned, we work very closely with sister company ECD. They're, very good for what they do, their architecture. They're PHPP designers. So what we find is where we've got complex buildings, if we model something in SAP, it only sort of really goes so far. So on complex buildings, be that domestic or commercial, we tend to, try and encourage the clients to also run in PHPP, which will give us a much more accurate and holistic view of the model. Again, the thing is with SAP is that we're not always covering all of the building within SAP, or certainly within RDSAP. So PHPP really does give a much better picture. So this was a project we did with ECMK, Wilmcote House. It's a high-rise block of flats in Portsmouth. It was designed to NFIT, passive house standard. The important thing about this was there was a lot of monitoring carried out before and afterwards. So you can see, the before there was a lot of heat loss, a lot of leakage, and there was a lot of data collected through that monitoring. Now, what that's helped to do, is come up with, once the work was carried out, it was obvious that a lot of the people prior to this work were living in fuel poverty. The conditions were terrible. You can see the mould in the photograph up there. A lot of people couldn't afford to use the heating at all, and therefore it was, quite a dire, experience for them. The optimal heat, which I think is 21 degrees, a lot of the properties were falling well short of that. After the work was done, everybody was in the accepted heat range, and most of these people aren't using their heating at all. So they've come out of fuel poverty. And the interesting thing for this about the performance gap is when it was modelled within 23 kilowatts per hour, and in actual usage it was 22. So through doing the monitoring and doing it, accurately through PHPP, it sort of proved that it can be done, and it's very accurate. And really the important thing is that these people it's really, what the data's doing is helping, this has helped people's lives, it's helped their comfort. They're no longer living in these sort of conditions. So another project we did again with ECD is a commercial building. I'm getting stuck on the wires. It's a sheltered housing unit for Church of England. So again, what ECD did was modelled it within. Well, they produced a 3D model and then they put it through PHPP. We went along and did an assessment on each flat, and what we've done is sort of merge the information, merge the data from what we've gathered with the data that they've gathered, and put it together to give options for the client to see how they can move forward to really make this a better performing property. So basically this is it's just been put into PHPP, and the heat loss was calculated from, sort of initial analysis, which basically gave us an understanding for the costs if they were to look at doing a whole building wrap and EWI, and we also looked at PV and heating options. So we mapped it out on the roof plan, how many PVs we could, put in there, and worked it back for each flat. I think, this is sort of given the client enough information to understand at the moment they couldn't really afford to do the EWI. But with the PV and possibly air source heat pump, or, it might be ground source heat pump, I think, they've found a way forward with that. So, for us, collecting data and managing data really, is everything. The accuracy of everything we do really is based on that, on collecting the data. But it's important to remember that is just a tool to get us somewhere, which is really about decarbonising and improving stock for everybody. And that's our team. Thank you. Balaz, if you want to come up. I think it's probably easier just to leave it like that, really, isn't it?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Balaz. I work as Director of Innovation and Net Zero at DG Cities. DG Cities is an innovation consultancy owned by Greenwich Council. So we do a lot of work with the borough itself, but we also try and apply our learnings to any other local authorities or other public bodies that might be interested in kind of getting some of that knowledge. We try and do the sort of things that help to innovate and push forward certain elements of kind of public bodies. And this is sort of the case with Retrofit as well. So we have been working a lot with the housing department within the council, which is very similar to any other large asset management organization that is trying to look at tens of thousands of assets across a portfolio and trying to decide what to do with them, how to address this net zero challenge. So potentially kind of in the talk, you will see how maybe data that, say, John's team might provide in terms of a building by building level or property by property level, how that can be almost aggregated together so that then kind of people can make decisions based on, which projects to do first, which projects to do second, what to do in certain areas, how to communicate that with residents. And this is something that we have not found lots of people actually having in kind of local authorities, which would be good if they did. So it's kind of having a home-by-home plan. So if you asked, say, any asset manager and say, okay, what are you going to do with this building this year? Or what are you going to do with that building next year? They don't know the answer. And I think it's quite reasonable to suggest that they should. How do we achieve that? I mean, first is obviously kind of collecting the data, and that's what the talk is about today, so, data. Understanding the stock, kind of the stock condition survey sort of things, but also a lot more, like lots of data already exists, which people are not using. There are multiple systems that every asset manager will be having around repairs, kind of what repairs they have done, when, how much they cost. A lot of that is not actually used in planning capital works, planning big programs around, where should we invest. It's almost like those operations and then there is, renewal. So it's important to kind of start bringing that in. Resident complaints, if people are complaining about something, it's probably not good, so maybe you should kind of try and fix that first. Costs or revenues, kind of how much you're actually charging people, and kind of how does that compare to costs. All of that is really interesting. Then it's important to kind of establish the indicators, like what are we going to be focusing on, kind of what is really kind of the key objectives of our team. And then based on that, we can start prioritizing. So based on that, we can start saying, okay, these sort of blocks or these sort of buildings should go first. We should do something with them first, and we should do these sort of things first. These other ones, maybe they're doing all right, so maybe we can address them in 5 years' time. it sounds very logical and sounds very simple almost, kind of quite silly to say this, but a lot of this actually is not happening. So we are really trying to sort of build up and make sure that this actually does happen in the real world. Based on that, we can start planning. So we can create kind of these year-by-year works and coordinated programs. Coordinated programs it's the sort of idea that one team within a large asset group knows what the other team is doing, and maybe they use the same set of building site setups or the same scaffolding for the same project. Again, very simple in principle, not that easy to kind of achieve that, and then kind of align it to any other works. So we are quite interested within Grange to creating neighborhood sort of level programs and work programs, where it's not only about let's do buildings, which is what again a department would be doing, but also say, well, actually, if we're investing a lot of money here, what if somebody also fixed the gardens and kind of cut the grass and did that? And also, if we are creating maybe a space that was maybe an unoccupied space, maybe there is a GP surgery or something that could go in there, which they might be needing space, or there might be another extra service that we could actually start talking to people, because maybe we're going to be going into their homes, they have to leave for the day because we are very disruptive. Maybe for that day we're actually kind of aligning some other activities that they might benefit from. So if, let's say, these are people who kind of have been on benefits, or maybe they're struggling financially, maybe they are in fuel poverty, maybe we are able to provide them advice on the day when we are actually solving some of their problems by installing insulation, etc. We can also kind of look at rebudgeting with them, or kind of looking at some of their kind of other services that they are accessing from the council. And then there's all about delivery, and then kind of capturing the data. So continuously updating this kind of system that we are creating, and make sure that it's up to date. Make sure that we are kind of collecting the right sort of data, and we are also trusting it, and then kind of monitor it, report, and then continuously reprioritize if certain things come up. So obviously, we cannot fix the next 20 years what we're going to be doing. It's important to kind of keep updating that. This is sort of all the high level. Well, where does the data come from? Well, the data really, kind of as I said, comes from everywhere. Like whatever component almost a building might have, you probably have data around it, because somebody ever sometimes fixed it, somebody at one point looked at it, somebody at one point complained about it, somebody at one point liked it, didn't like it, whatever. So it is possible to kind of capture whatever you want from this. And then afterwards, what you do is basically kind of try and select kind of through the KPIs and then through the prioritization, which one is actually really important. Are we really need to fix kitchens, or is that actually not as important as fixing, I don't know, the ventilation? So you can start looking at that. And you also have kind of in different assets, like say in a lot of housing or something, like you have different stakeholders owning different parts of buildings. So you might have tenants owning individual properties or individual offices in commercial buildings or individual floors, and then you will have people owning the whole structure. And then you will be doing probably works and kind of capital works and repairs on kind of the whole thing, and also just individual ones as well. So it's also good to kind of separate those out. And then you do the analysis. So, you look at a city, and then you kind of able to start putting, there what each, property kind of has in terms of the various kind of data elements. And then able to start identifying what repairs might be due, what work is actually missing. Then you start planning, and then you bring them together. If units are, they should be different colors. I don't know why they're not, or whatever. Imagine they are all 3 different colors. They were on my screen. You kind of start having groups of homes which are near each other, and that's sort of the neighborhood action. You want to do projects probably next to each other, because that has additional benefits. If people living there, or kind of their own buildings or properties which are not actually within your portfolio, you might incentivize them. They might kind of have a good amount of FOMO, and they might say, oh shit, I want that because they have it. It's also a lot easier with resident engagement. If you're able to convince someone's neighbor, it's most likely that you are able to kind of go into their own property as well. So that's, and also, if you're kind of doing something nearby, it's not necessarily going to be helping kind of with the operational delivery side. Kind of, we have heard some people say it's great. Some people said, actually, I just can't even park all the vans I want to, kind of all my builders to have on that same street. So it actually doesn't help me to do the houses next to each other. But it really helps to be able to kind of transform a neighborhood. So if people, we are trying to make people's lives better. If all the buildings on a street get, something happens to them, then you might be able to kind of, in a much nicer way, impact people's lives, because the whole neighborhood is actually nicer, rather than if you just, run around. And then, you're able to create kind of this home by home plan where, you know what you're going to be doing with each property. And then you start delivering it. And then you start updating and monitoring. Or you're able to also kind of, as you go, flag up any issues that might happen. And then you might have to reprioritize, because you might say, well, actually, some really kind of, bad things have been happening to this property. Until now, I didn't assume that it was kind of poor performing, but I've been capturing some data. Maybe a person had lots of damp complaints because they have a leak. And then maybe you assess it and you say, actually, we cannot just kind of repair it. We need to kind of do something more structured. Or if it kind of makes sense to do so. Again, different colors, but yeah. And then kind of tracking what happens. Also, not every kind of asset manager actually has a system where you can just go on the map, click on a building and be like, and see what works are actually happening there. It often sits on spreadsheets at best, back of envelopes at worst. So this is a kind of a system that we are currently kind of setting up, and kind of very, always very interested to see how others are doing it within the industry, whether people are doing it kind of in different ways or kind of have additional kind of suggestions, and I would be very happy to incorporate them. Yeah, that's us. Thank you. I'll be handing over to Matthew.
Hi everyone, let me see where we're at. Just checking going the right way. Yes, good evening. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Matthew Payton, an impact manager at Built Environment Smarter Transformation. So that is a construction innovation centre based up in Scotland, working on all sorts of projects. My areas are digital, kind of AI and digital twin, primarily in that realms. So I'm here by invitation by Laura to talk about the project Alchemy, which I think is going to fit into the brief just now, and already hearing from the other speakers, I think it is bang on the money. So hopefully this is of interest to you guys. So Alchemy is our digital enabled platform, which has helped specifically non-domestic building owners who want to decarbonise their estates by reducing uncertainty, optimising their investments across their entire portfolio, and providing a better built environment for their users. So again, there's lots of work in this area for domestic properties. This is specifically non-domestic, where we're trying to target that kind of leftover market. We had an introduction already, which is just talking about these, and I don't need to convince the room about the need for retrofit and the numbers. But this is very, very simple maths that even I can follow. This is about 2 million. I'm looking at kind of Great Britain region, 2 million non-domestic buildings in the UK. By 2050, 80% of the buildings that will be in existence at that point already exist. So again, some simple math suggests they have 1.6 million buildings to retrofit by that point. And that potentially is our market here. It's the people we need to work with, the people we need to influence, the people we need to support to get on those journeys. So what are we doing? I'm going to describe our aims, and then I'm going back and tell you a bit more about the tool that we're developing and how we're getting there. So we're aiming to optimise the process of retrofit for property and portfolio owners, taking in all relevant data points and site-specific information to understand the best possible outcome. Again, like the speaker suggested, we need to find out what people are actually doing and make decisions based on real-life data rather than just ad hoc interventions and slapping on external wall insulation. And reducing the payback horizon. So again, if we know what we're targeting, we can do it effectively and put in the best needs for the right property and get the most out of it. And CO2, minimising CO2 emissions during intervention, but also importantly during the building's operations is a key driver for us. And scale, that one at the bottom I've left, probably the most important for last there. The tool will enable building upgrades across large portfolios with minimal cost and with ease. So as we know, at the moment you do a retrofit study, you do your interventions, you then move on. You probably aren't going back to check it. You trust that the builder's delivered, they've filled that wall. You then go into the next building and you do another survey, and then you do another intervention, keep going. What we're aiming there is to look holistically across your whole portfolio and make the right decisions driven by the data. So partners involved in this project, so it's an innovation project that we're working on just now, so it's 18 months. We have Elemental Power, turn the page. Elemental Power are software providers, and they're driving clean energy systems. We have Atomate, the tech provider, so they're providing the hardware for us, and they're really looking at optimizing building performance. We have Holosphere, who are our visual experts. They are our bespoke user interface, and engaging realities is their frame. And we have BT Consult and Build. Ron BT is a leading passive house designer, a pioneer in modular and off-site construction for retrofit situations, and produced the first off-site manufactured modular building to passive house standards, which is available at the moment. And energy specialists, so RE24 are specialists in the green energy market and can access green energy that's completely traceable 24/7 and can provide that to clients to make the best of the available situations in their areas. The client, so we have Basildon District Council as one of our partners. They're really important because they're acting as our client in this form. They have a number of different buildings and portfolios, I imagine a local council does, and they're our test bed. They're our test study and feeding back what clients need and what they want us to deliver for them. And we have me right at the end there. So we're Best. We are project managing, which is a really interesting job for this one because we've got a lot of different people in this process. Some are looking at data, some are looking at real world situations, some are looking entirely at energy, some are looking at the movement optimization of space and place. So bringing them all together is how we get this project, what makes it unique. We're also involved in the user engagement. So a real big thing for this project is getting to know how people are using buildings and their reaction and their take on retrofit. So equality and inclusion is a real factor. We want to know what people expect when you're talking about retrofit. Will they use an app to lower their temperature? Will they accept external air handling systems on their historic building? Will they pay a little bit more council tax in order to make savings? Or do they just want things cheap and don't want to raise anything? And where does that leave us? So that's really important. How we're doing that? We are creating immersive digital twins. So digital twins is a bit of a divisive word. Generally, people have different conceptions of what that is. They've got different notions and different definitions. But this is a physically accurate energy simulation using high quality graphics, which gives a real clear visual indicator of what's happening in a building. We're using sensor tech, so we're monitoring performance, comfort, but importantly for this project, we are monitoring the test beds and the sandpits that we're creating, so that gives accountability for the process. So it's not just synthetic data at the start, we're actually justifying, qualifying that afterwards and finding out how we're doing. And passive house retrofit, so we're enabling clean heat effectively by reducing demand in the building. It's as simple as that. There's no point in meeting high demand if you can, at the first stop, reduce that right down to little or nothing. Analytical trading, as I said before, we got the opportunity here. The energy models encompass fixed and flexible loads across electrical and heat domains, enabling the best of local renewables and storage of energy and electricity. So the overview of the project, it's a data-driven project, which is looking at historical data. So for all the sites we're looking at, we have half-hourly data. So this is looking at everything from energy demand, it's looking at local weather, it's looking at how we use the buildings. That will be from data sets, but also be from the sensors pre-installed before we make any interventions. And that allows us to make decisions at the feasibility stage, again, driven by real data. It's powered by AI, so the technology and the software behind what we're developing is spun out from the biggest Excel spreadsheet you've seen in the world, and this developed, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, it was making so many decisions that they've actually introduced AI and kind of smart decision making in the background. And this really means that it's making quick analysis of massive data. You know what AI does. It's getting the best of everything and making decisions for you. The decision making is really interesting because scenarios are visualized in a visual output, But what this is doing, because you've got AI, because you've got so many data points, you can tweak it to exactly what you want to get out of it. And it will tell you what the best way to achieve that is. And we have compliance and regulation at the bottom there. So again, using a large language model, this is actually helping the councils, local authorities, property owners get the information they need from it. So what are they applying? Are they applying for funding? What do they need to know for that? Are they pacifying tenants? What do they need to know for that? And they can intuitively get the right response, an easy and understandable solution or output. So looking a bit of how this is structured and how this is developed, we'll be looking at very, very quick data gathering from site. So this is using a drone survey and photogrammetry, so it's about 30 minutes of flight at most on building sites there. This is important for us because it's going to be a scalable tool, and if a local authority is using this, they're not going to be able to pay for tens of thousands of pounds worth of LiDAR scanning out on site to get millimetre accurate surveys. And as we said before, a digital twin is appropriate in some cases. Sometimes a floor plan is enough to give you information. So this is a really quick way to get a really visual output. And I'm slightly out of order. But again, this is the same data, but we're overlaid with the thermal information. Again, this is a quick and easy thermal drone. What this is really doing is starting to build up that layered picture of all the information we're gathering very, very quickly, but then presenting it in both a lovely, that is a 3D model, it looks almost picture realistic at the moment, but it's something you can understand. You can see that's a building, you can see what's happening, you can see it in real time, and it tells you a little bit more sometimes than just a picture or a spreadsheet. And again, this is one of our project partners' previous projects. This is a big hotel and offices, and this is looking at the digital twin for an energy system, and this is giving you live data about solar generation, about grid pool. It's talking about how energy is spread around that building, and you can pick whatever you want from it. This is a similar interface to what's going to be ended up at the end output. That is super slow going past. Quite unique about this project, and lots of people have contacted us since the start of this project to see if they're doing similar things and they're working together with other people to do similar realms. One thing I've not really heard is the extent of the site information they're gathering. So we have a number of sites through Wales, England and Scotland, and these are all non-domestic buildings. This is everything from town centres, it's historic buildings, it's 60s community centre, it's shop fronts, it's light industrial units, it's office spaces. This is a real mix of spaces all the way across the UK, Great Britain anyway, which gives us a unique opportunity. We'll be using them as test beds to develop the information and harness their resources, but we'll also be able to speak to all these people in all these sites across the country, which gives us the opportunity to ask those questions that we've not really asked before, not had good engagement with. So we will be going into these communities, we'll be getting public off the street, we'll be asking them questions, but that engagement will also be with the user, with the owner, with the operator, and with the stakeholders throughout those buildings as well. So all these buildings do have different challenges, they've all got different needs, and that's something which will become very visual in the end tool, and it will show you very clearly, very graphically, which one your intervention should be taking. A good anecdote already, we've discovered that there's a historic town hall here, one of these big grand kind of Victorian buildings, versus one of the 1960s community centres. The community centre is about a fifth the size of the town hall, but in actual fact, they have the same energy use. So the council's already been looking at very expensive and controversial secondary glazing on their historic listed building, as well as internal insulation, which is reducing floor footprints. But in actual fact, a small intervention in the 1960s community centre would have a much bigger impact than it would spending the difficult retrofit job in that town hall. And it's not something that would be quite intuitive, you might think, straight away. So that'll become very clear and very graphically and easy to pick up those missed opportunities. So what's our outcomes? We are creating a commercial product that will allow impartial data-driven optimization and decarbonisation pathways. This will be available. And again, the partners you've seen there will all be using that in different ways. So we have the architects there that will be using it to justify what they're what their interventions are. So looking at heat pump installations, look at the best opportunities for it, how they're going to use it and what the returns are going to be. We also have the case studies and pilot sites. So we have probably up to about 15 test sites across the country. And this will give us all the information that we need to do there and will last as a legacy offering there that we'll continue to harness information from. And it benefits for clients as well. So the council will actually be using all this data and information to inform their own retrofit plan. Once that goes ahead, the tool actually then takes all the information that is being gathered post-intervention to refine the algorithm in the background. So again, that's one of the special ideas here, is that it's not just a one and done. They will go through, and if that actually flags up that it's not done what they said it will do, the algorithm gets changed, and next time there's a bank of knowledge that's been informed, developed and refined for the next space. That's me. So that was very quick. That's it. Thanks, Evan. I'll hand over to Nisha.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anisha Minocha. I'm the CEO of Quantico, and we're revolutionizing net zero investments across large-scale commercial property portfolios. A little bit about Quantico. I spun it out through my original consulting company called Quant Energy. Quantico's been through various accelerators with the Energy Systems Catapult, and we're part of the Innovate UK net zero heat project as well, part of the Cambridge Cleantech. And very briefly about me, I've been in the built environment for about a quarter century, and through various lenses of consulting, delivering projects, delivering renewables and energy performance contracting and data, and being at the bleeding edge of data and harnessing data over the years. In terms of partners and funding, we've been funded through Innovate UK, also through the Climate Innovation Platform funded by HSBC, and we are partnered with Swansea University and Energy Systems Catapult, and also had support through the University of Birmingham in our various projects and stages. Our mission is to challenge the status quo of piecemeal retrofits. What I mean by that is one building and one project at a time. That's how retrofits happen. In the built environment, accelerate that decision-making to enable organizations to make that investment decision at scale. And we've been talking about scale with some of the speakers before us as well today. And our vision is to pioneer that data-led revolution. We know we don't have great data. We know that. But we've got to start with what we have and work with what we have and push that forward. And how we make that a catalyst for clean tech investment. We don't have the time. I've got numbers on the next slide, so I'm going to skip over that one because we've heard that twice already with the number and scale and challenge on decarbonising commercial real estate. And we have seen these numbers. I'm going to dive into a little bit more about the challenges and why we've chosen this path and how we're doing this. The challenges for commercial real estate decarbonisation are it's complex, it's fragmented. You've heard from Matthew and Alash and from John as well, the complexity, the fragmentation, the different property types. There's no silver bullet. There's a huge number of technologies to think about. It's overwhelming. The time, the cost and the accuracy it needs. There are two versions in the market. One is there's the time-consuming process that's expensive. And the other end of the market is this low-cost, really rapid ones, but they're not accurate or reliable for investment grade. They're not investment grade ready to get people to make those investments. And the cost of technical expertise is high for most organizations. And secondly, we don't have all the skills in the market to drive that forward at scale as well. And the third part is, speaking of scale, the existing tools are not suitable for mass adoption yet. So what ends up happening is point solutions get adopted, which is, again, one building, one project at a time that goes around the houses in commercial organizations, viewed by various stakeholders, and they all finally make a decision, and then on to the next building and the next project. But we don't have that luxury of time ahead of us. And speaking of multiple stakeholders, I'm going to dive in and use this session as a moment to think about the various stakeholders that have different data needs, that have different agendas. That's quite key to understanding that and breaking those barriers in terms of investment. So moving to the next one. In terms of stakeholder agendas and needs, so this is a little bit complex. I'm going to spend a moment on this. I've chosen 4 key C-suite stakeholders. We're talking commercial real estate, we're talking large organizations with large property portfolios, therefore they're likely to have a finance officer, CFO, a chief climate officer or ESG, or a CSO, a chief sustainability officer, an engineering, and a property lead. I've left the CEO out. I expect the CEO is interested in all of the above anyway. When we then look at their various agendas, the CFO is interested in the financial and risk management with specific data needs around investment, returns, compliance, business compliance, carbon offset burdens if they're going to go down that route. There's a cost associated with it. We've got the ESG and the climate officer interested in decarbonisation and compliance from a decarbonisation perspective, who's interested in portfolio level and building level. What's the potential for net zero? How far can we go as an organisation? Where are we with compliance, with the various compliance standards, depending on the organisation and the sector, if it's banking and finances, TCFD, TCFD, TNFD, CSRD, ESOS. It's the whole alphabet soup. It's super, super time consuming and overwhelming for everybody. And that's just compliance. That's not actually delivering the impact. And the scope 3 impacts is being talked about everywhere, but how do we break that complexity down? It is a huge area just in its own right. Engineering. Engineering leads are interested in technology, risk, reliability. There's various technology permutation. If you're going to look at the building as a whole and want to look at various technologies, they have to come together technically. They have to be reliable. There's so many new technologies coming out, which is fantastic, but how does one keep up with all of those? And also just in technology performance and the validation of that. And the final one is a property director who's looking at, what's my asset value? How am I going to optimize my estate? It's post-COVID. Do we have enough space? Do we need less space? Are people coming back to the office? What's happening with that? And therefore, what's estate utilization? What's their stranding risk, especially when it comes to the EPC performance? Are they able to sell their properties if they own them? Are they able to keep renting them, retain their asset values? If those properties are being financed through corporate real estate banking organizations, then therefore, are those retaining the value for their remortgage, their corporate remortgages? So there's all these other considerations coming in. And utility cost, we all talk about that every day. So the number of challenges here that we're trying to break down, and each stakeholder, my analogy is, there's an elephant and there's 5 people who are blindfolded. They're all holding a different part. Someone's holding the tail, someone's holding the ears, someone's holding the trunk and going, this is what we think. Decarbonisation in the real estate is exactly that. Different people, and they all need to come together to grasp that elephant, but they all have slightly different data needs. How do we get there? So the solution that we're developing at the moment is Quantico. It's data-led smart insights to optimize that retrofit investment, those decisions to drive net zero targets and bottom line savings. It's powered by our advanced machine learning algorithms that we've developed, coupled with technical research and low carbon technology know-how. And we're bringing in marketplace information as well on the real product, TRL 89, in the market today. So it goes from feasibility to pre-procurement. I'll pause for a moment. Is that just going to get a sip of water? Right, so what does it do? It's about simplified and vendor agnostic process. So easily accessible information. We want to take away the administrative burden that every organization has and give us all the data in any format. We work with that. We crunch through it. There's no expertise or very low expertise needed to provide basic information. It does go through quite a lot of detail, but we've simplified that whole process of data gathering and also then simplified investment decision making. So there's market comparison between product A and product B and product C, and also the cost associated with it and who's going to provide it to you. Excuse me. It's about creating rapid, cost-effective and accurate assessments that enable C-suite stakeholders to make those investment decisions, so that it's reducing the time from feasibility to pre-procurement, because we can automate that. We're optimizing the cost of, at the moment, 4 technologies, and we're adding 2 more, which are part of the Innovate UK project that we're funded to do. So the system at the moment works with solar PV, battery storage, EV charging and heat pumps in commercial buildings, and rapidly works through every permutation at a granular half-hour level and a seasonal level, to be able to say what is the technical, financial and regulatory impact of each of those permutations. And we're adding 2 more. More on those in a moment. And they're validated. So we've got Swansea University working with us, validating it through the international agency, energy agency funded demonstrators that they have set up in Swansea as well. It's scalable across various geographies. We're using actual building data combined with information, utility contracts, as well as geospatial information, and on top of that, all the various weather models as well, and then market information. So bringing all those data sets together and and physics modeling, all built in together. It's holistic because we're providing technical, financial, and regulatory, and then finally, it's about faster realization of carbon reductions. So we can work through this in a matter of hours and a maximum of a day, rather than days and weeks to turn the assessments around. And essentially what we're seeing is some of the assessments we've done and delivered, which we'll come on to in a moment, up to 63, that are yielding up to 63% carbon reduction in individual buildings, and about 3 times, if I say 3 times faster, we know we're a bit more than that, but at least 3 times faster than the standard processes. The product is to empower real estate owners, investors and managers to make the strategic decisions with confidence and at scale. So we do detailed building level analysis, but it's also done across the entire portfolio. So it enables customers to make those decisions on which buildings, which projects first, and how that progresses into the investment and project tracking scale module. We are building this as a B2B SaaS platform. So it's about consumer goes in, puts in the information, gets the results. So we are then not the blocker, because then it's not down to our scale as a business. It enables people to do their own assessments and move things forward. It's easy to use and it's scalable, and we will provide training. So in brief, it's quicker and deeper, it's holistic and tailored. So it's looking at the entire building, it's looking at technical feasibility, financial and regulatory, and it's tailored because we're taking actual data from the building and locational information that we're bringing together as well. And it's vendor agnostic. So at the moment we've got a few thousand products, over 2,000 products. That's not enough. We want more of the market. And we bring in the technical data sheets of those products, so we're able to say how each one of those is going to perform. And we're going through the validation process. We've validated a number of our algorithms and outputs already, and we've also used AI for various different elements to bring in the prediction, and to make the prediction engine even sharper and have honed it further. So where are we actually operating? So if we broadly divide the value chain of decarbonisation into ESG compliance and reporting, energy monitoring and targeting, and then into the smart buildings, IoT space. And then at the other end, we've got the project specification and delivery. We're coming in at just before that. So to enable organisations and the C-suite to ring fence the funding, knowing it's actually data backed, to then turn it into the next level of specification on site. So what we're doing is we're eliminating the first energy audit. How many energy audits sit in the industry that have never been looked at again because they're not data backed? There's a site visit, but how detailed do they go in terms of data, in terms of predicting? And that's the bit that we're replacing with the tool. And the carbon impact is huge, because you can look at this across the entire portfolio, and you can start to align it with your capital lifecycle asset replacement as well. So no point taking away a good boiler when it can wait for another 3 years or whatever it needs to be, but actually you've got that planned and tracked through the entire software. I mentioned technologies. We've currently got solar PV, EV charging, heat pumps and battery storage working through the engine, and we've got thermal storage and solar thermal actively being developed and validated in our algorithm set and being tested in the real environment with the demonstrators at Swansea University. And they'll be coming up this year, very soon. Very briefly, outputs from a technical feasibility potential, it goes through the technology permutations. At the moment, we do 11 permutations across the 4 technologies. That's going to go up to 30 plus permutations when we add the next two technologies. It's sizing, it's understanding the vendors and knowing which products will be applicable in those buildings. But it provides a range, so you're procurement ready. It's not one single product. It's financial feasibility, so it's a full investment analysis, discounted cash flows, etc. That specific financial metrics that CFOs need to see and CEOs need to see. And finally, the regulatory impacts, so stranding risk and EPC ratings, but we're also bringing in the TCFD as well as the CSRD requirements, the upcoming CSRD requirements, so people can be pressing buttons to get the right data to meet their compliance requirements rather than spending inordinate amounts of time putting a compliance report together. And the benefits being optimized investment planning, earlier realization of targets, and being procurement compliant, which is quite important. And when you're talking scale, there are also further procurement benefits from working this at an aggregated level across multiple properties. And some traction that we've had with early stage pilot customers, with Transport for London, with their corporate real estate buildings, looking across their CHP, their solar PV generation, but also their heat decarbonisation. But one of the key ones was a CHP end of life assessment on where that goes with decarbonisation of heat. Southend-on-Sea City Council, we worked with them with their council buildings, their education buildings, but also with some of the stakeholders, businesses in the city as well. So across industrial, education, retail, healthcare, and some council buildings as well. London Borough of Merton, really interesting one. They'd invested in a lot of solar from the feed-in tariff days, but realised that there was potentially not enough self-consumption. A lot of it was probably been going out, especially if you think about schools. The best time that they're, the best generation time is school holidays, and guess what? Nobody's around to actually use it. It's all being exported back, which is all very good for the system, but was not helping them get further with their decarbonisation targets. So this was about what is it they need to do. So when we did the whole battery assessment on that, we realised that there was a proportion of them that were valid. So our tool was equally useful in them knowing where not to invest. And that's equally important where cost and money and economics are tight to the moment. And then that went straight through into a PSDS, which is a public sector decarbonisation scheme application, which got approved and they've been delivered. So everything I've talked about is the assessment module. What we're also actively building is the next stage, is the implementation, is to be able to track that implementation and link it to asset capital lifecycle replacement plans, because that's something that still happens in not very sophisticated, but very basic spreadsheets in the industry still. The ability to then take that project tracking, to the verification module, which we're building along in alignment with the IPMVP standard, and then be able to then get to the compliance piece, press a button, get the right compliance. Whatever bit of the alphabet soup you have to, comply with, it's that. So those are all part of the Innovate UK funded project that we're building at the moment. One other thing that we are bringing in at this stage is Scope 3 impacts, which again we realise, and this is something we've realised with conversations with some of the customers we've had, is what's the impact? If I buy this battery, what is the impact? If I buy a lithium ion versus lithium iron phosphate versus a sodium ion versus what happens with my heat pump or refrigerant I'm buying. There are all these conversations people are starting to think about. So we're bringing in scope 3 impacts for embodied carbon and environmental impact as we speak. We've conducted the research. We've got about 900 plus products that we're already got the full information on. However, we're looking to get more and more, but of course we're reliant on verified EPDs being available in the market. But where we don't have the verified EPDs, what we are in the process of finalising is our methodology, but totally aligned with the TM65, which is embodied carbon methodology, and we're now breaking that down to bring working on how we bring that into our engine as well. So the ability to be able to say, right, if you are going to choose these solar panels, here's the 5 that we've recommended. What's the embodied carbon, what's the life cycle, and when does it actually pay back with operational energy efficiency? Because it has to pay back at some point before, this financial payback, but there is embodied carbon payback to be considered as well. Because if we don't do it now, we're going to lose that window. That solar panel's going to be around for 25, 30 years before it needs to be replaced again, or a heat pump's going to be around for 15 years. So we're going to lose that moment if we're not at least if we're not at least surfacing this information and making people aware of those impacts at this point in time. I will stop now, and we would thank you very much for your time. And of course, if you manage properties, if you own properties or invest in properties, commercial properties, do join us to speed up, simplify and secure our net zero future. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Laura.
Thank you, Anisha, and thank you to all our speakers. I'm going to ask you to join me on the stage, and then we can take some questions. My question to all the speakers is, where's the bit of data that you think most powerfully engages any kind of stakeholder in retrofit? That was to all of you, so you might any of you may answer first.
Answer, and it's going to be an easy one, that it's just money, isn't it, at the end of the day? I think no matter how any company or non-domestic building looks at it, can they afford it? Is it going to give return on money? We can all have very ambitious carbon goals and environmental. Oh, sorry. But yeah, at the end of the day, you need to be able to afford it. You need to be able to justify it and then prove that it's been worthwhile. So I would suspect that one. But that's a very general overview.
Same.
I would totally agree with that, because it very quickly moves on to what's it going to cost us before we know people know what their carbon, what they need to get to. And that's also a big barrier, because we know that not everything pays back if you break it down into individual products, into projects. And where we're finding customers are willing to think about it is, why do we look at the whole building? Some things pay back sooner, some things pay back much longer, have a longer time span for paying back. But if you start blending that together, look at the whole building, but also look at across portfolios, does that shrink it down and bring it down? But again, I think we do have that challenge at the moment in this economic climate. Where is it going to go? People are tightening their belts at the moment, so it's a...
Yeah, I think, it depends. For us, some clients actually, their focus is, and it's rare, but their focus is on carbon reduction. That's their important focus. But again, that really does come down to what they can afford to do within, But I think, it depends. Yeah, people's awareness are getting much more involved and heightened as to what they want to achieve and how they want to achieve it. But yeah, I guess it's a journey to be able to work out what they can do at the given point they're in now, or when they're trying to do the work. So yeah, unfortunately, money is a big part of the plan.
Same.
Can I add?
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, do you?
Okay, I'll share one of my beliefs. I believe that the current utility business case is just not right because it doesn't pay back. It's based on a fundamental price of energy, which we know is not structured correctly because of the way gas costs are socialized for electricity. That takes away the business case for decarbonising heat because, of course, gas is cheaper. Why would you pay more for electricity even if you get 3 times, 2.5 times a coefficient of performance for heat pumps? I think it needs to be linked to property values to make it fundamentally more important. I'm thinking about UK. If you think about homes, everybody fundamentally gets the price of my home. I know I can add value if I add a conservatory, if I upgrade my kitchen or whatever it is. And if we can fundamentally link upgrading and decarbonisation to that somehow, and it is possible, and there are banks starting to think along those lines. In commercial buildings, it's exactly the same. And we know that the EPCs are meant to be going, government's done a bit of a wind back on what's okay for EPCs, and it's not the best tool, it's a little bit of a blunt tool, it's not perfect, and it's being looked at the moment, but that lever does exist, and if it's linked to the fact that there will be a stranded property in 5 years' time, it's worth millions of pounds today, and it'll be worth 20% less in the market. Everybody fundamentally gets it, and therefore spending a little bit, maybe $1 million to upgrade that commercial property, it suddenly makes sense. So it's how do we then change that lever, because a utility business case just doesn't work.
Thank you. So are there any questions in the audience? Rachel, if you could just wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all really great presentations. I was wondering what you thought about the future of the interoperability of the data that you're all working with. Say you have a portfolio owner that has that buys a building that is modelled, that is using your software, that buys a building that's modelled with someone else's. Are there future plans to make that interoperable, or does that in some way kind of conflict with the business cases around your individual products?
I'm happy to jump in here. Most of the time already people are using already software. So there are already a requirement for anything new to be APIs. I don't think anybody's trying to buy something which is like going to replace everything they are currently running. So because they're already invested in something. So anything needs to be new, but kind of linking into things. So I don't think it's going to be a problem in the future, because there's always going to be kind of almost puzzle pieces looking for another puzzle piece, because everything needs to be kind of developed that way. And it's also not very, I think, economical to try and build up everything. Like a lot of the stuff that we are looking at is interfacing with repair management tools. But people have been, there are stuff there, like we don't want to replicate that. We're just going to be using it. So you're always kind of trying to almost like take things, add to that, and then hand it over to some other tools that people are going to be having financial systems, which are something that probably none of them want to change. So you always need to kind of link. So it's always going to be a piece, I think.
I can maybe jump in. This is a good one for our project, because we are working on this at the moment. We don't have a finished project or a finished product, but it is taking a bunch of different companies already doing their own thing and trying to do exactly that and mesh it together. So as Blash says, it's not about making everything exactly the same, but it's that common language, it's the standards, and it's the terminology, which we probably need to standardise enough. So everyone is doing their own topic, their own thing in their own area, but they're talking about the same thing with the same name. So at least you have a core principle you then import into the other projects. At the end of our project, we're hoping that each of the partners combine for a tool, but they're also working out how they can import data from other partners in that same way. So if at the end of the project the partners decide to go their own way, at least at the end of that, they will know what the future is for them and what they do with their data and how someone else uses it. Or, for example, they can take in third-party information in that same way.
Sorry, just to add to that, like, I think the one place where it could be annoying if you're start looking at things like embedded carbon, because I think there's quite a lot of ways of approaching certain things with embedded carbon or with any kind of carbon accounting. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that I think we need to figure out, so that, you know, your tool doesn't just divide it by 10 and then so it's less.
Sorry. Sorry. On a slightly smaller scale, one of the issues we have at the moment is where we work through Elmhurst as a provider. Now, for EPCs, and you know they're produced as PDFs. We can't take that PDF and use it in any sort of way. What we have to do is, you know, take the data from that and put it through different software and literally type everything in, which is a nightmare. It takes so much time. It's not accurate. It's you know, one of the worst things that we're having to deal with at the moment. What we're hoping, and their plans are to, you know, in the new iteration will be to use open source. So that's going to really change our lives and hopefully create a much more efficient way that we can work, more accurate, and then to be able to pass that information to, you know, the architects so that they can take that and use it in you know, for their work. Because at the moment it's, you know, we're banging our head against the wall, if I'm honest.
Anything else from the audience? So right at the back.
Thank you. My question is mainly for Mr. Jonathan, but anyone else can answer if they also. So let's say when you win a retrofitting project and you have a budget, so whether you have to retrofit a historical building, a commercial building, a council flat, when you do have to, let's say, go to scout for like the various solution, whether it's a insulation wall, ventilation system, what is your priority? Is it how much, let's say, the product or the solution costs? Is it how much, let's say, the EPC rating that it'll allow you to gain? Is it the energy saving, the cost? I think I'm repeating myself. The cost, or like EPC rating, or is there anything else?
Yeah, sure.
That you prioritize?
I mean, for one of the first things we do is try and understand what's the client's intended outcome. What do they want from the project, and that will drive what, you know, where we'll aim to, you know, to go with that. When we model, we tend to, you know, work a fabric first, and we'll work on the simple measures, the simple cheap measures first, and see where we get to. And it's kind of like one step at a time. We'll do one measure, and then if that gets us to where we need to be, that would be it. If it doesn't, we take the next measure, and it's a course of steps to see, you know, you combine each measure as you go. And then I think, you know, once we've modelled it, then we'll go to designers and, you know, and get costed. And then, you know, there's always got to be a conversation with the clients, with the design team. And it's not, you know, the first solution might not be what you end up with. But, you know, you have to sort of make a step towards the goal. But usually, yeah, it's fabric first and simple measures. And what I was going to say earlier, there's a new terminology that's coming out, fabric fifth, which, you know, I'm sure you've all, you know, some of you, all of you heard of it. So again, going back to what we were saying earlier, there is you know, perhaps an argument for looking at technology and, you know, for energy providers to come up with new, ways to be able to provide energy. I'm thinking Octopus have done one now, producing something for, where there's PV and, it's battery storage and, it makes it cheaper. Therefore, for heat pumps, everybody's sort of at the moment looking to say, well, you have to, insulate that property before you do, add this new heat pump technology. There is an argument, not everybody likes it, but that you can kind of bypass that with these tariffs and with this technology, that if it's managed properly, it can make it efficient without worrying too much about the external wall insulation.
I would agree, and I would actually comment on the fabric first question, because in commercial premises, when you start getting into the larger commercial premises, fabric doesn't always stack up, and it's too disruptive, and the cost of scaffolding far outweighs it. And one of our, in our experience, in all this time, there's very, very small percentage, I'm talking under 2%, that actually go through the full, let's decant everybody from the building, let's now take a whole fabric approach and upgrade it to bring it back. One of our customers had gone through that process, and they found that it was going to be cheaper to knock that building down, build a brand new, building, than actually do the whole piece. And this is only a 3-story building. We're not talking big, large scale, only 3-story building. And it was just economically not stacking up. They looked at Innovate, they looked at the Innovate standard, they looked at a near passive house, they looked at all the various options. It was still cheaper to knock it down, start again.
I think this is the opportunity for AI and the work that we're looking at the moment, because the tool we're developing will run through thousands of iterations, and it will literally be a slider. So at the start and the interface, you can slide and say, it's really important that I save carbon, and then it'll show you the knock-on implications. Actually, that means this is higher, but this is lower. And then you can increase your payback period, or you can set a cap on your budget, and it'll show you what's available. So it's not from experience, because that's in development just now, but that is the opportunity now that we can do thousands and thousands and thousands of very small, minute iterations. And some of the energy is coming from the grid, some is coming from solar, some is from heat pumps, and you manage and find the optimal result. And
I think that's, one of the things at the moment, I think people are sort of ignoring the embodied carbon with EWI and what you're actually doing to make that, so it really, it's becoming quite a debate at the moment about, and it's, quite, I would say, divisive, really.
Yes, that was definitely, I've been thinking quite a lot about the fabric first philosophy recently, and there obviously has been quite a lot, certainly in the LinkedIn bubbles about it, so it was interesting to get your perspectives, and I think it all gets a lot more complicated when you start really taking into account the embodied carbon. Matthew mentioned AI. I know there's an element of machine learning in many of the projects that we're funding. Is there something that you can foresee or would like to see coming through machine learning and AI that will change your relationship, your working relationship with data? Is there a magic tool you're hoping that somebody's developing?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, like I say, right at the moment, we've got different systems that don't connect with each other. There's no communication between them. Even more than that, we've got different providers like Elmhurst, Stroma, ECMK, that again have got completely different. If you do assessment in one, you can't do the coordination in another. It doesn't link. Nothing links together. So there's no link between, it sounds like you maybe developed something that we need to come and talk to you about, but in general, everything's working in silos. There's no links between the various different strands. It just doesn't communicate together, and I think that's where we need to really, pool our resources to try and get all these things linked up.
In terms of where machine learning and AI are going, We're at the very start of that process right now. We've only just had a number of AI tools being made available to us through cloud service providers. It wasn't available to everybody. It was a very niche thing that only Google DeepMinds and others could afford, which was super expensive till literally 18 months ago when this whole thing's just exploded. What we're finding is that it's still very nascent. It's got deep capability in large language models, but have we actually nailed the use case that we really needed to? There's deep capability in computer vision. We've worked with some very deep models in computer vision. They don't all stack up. It doesn't always do the job when you say, okay, here's a computer vision, here's a geospatial image, let's give us what we want. It doesn't do it. It's not quite there yet. So it's fascinating. It's great that it's accessible, it's affordable, but we're really at the start of that, and there's still a huge amount to be done. So we looked at some fantastic stuff that Meta's done with, it's called Segment Anything. You put an image in, it segments it into everything, every component part, like fascinating, let's use that. Let's use that for every satellite image that's coming through, and let's put it through this model to know exactly the roof size, to identify what's usable roof area for solar generation. Guess what? If there was a cat on the roof, it counted the cat as a different object. I'm not joking. It's not there because it's not smart. It's breaking down an image it's fed, but it's not differentiating. So that next level of what is it really used for is not. But if you look at all their videos, it's fabulous, but you still need a human being looking at that automation process, that chain isn't quite there. And when you look at large language models, interfacing with vision models, interfacing with other models, that chain doesn't exist yet. It doesn't quite come together. So we're still quite a way away. That's our experience.
So there's still exciting developments to look forward to then.
We're very
Hopefully.
excited.
I was going to say, controversially, what I'm looking forward to is the removal of dashboards. We have pie charts and everything that I've discussed and a lot of us discussed here in the tools we're developing. Actually, I think we're not that far away from something reading them and reading all the results and giving the output. I've got it in my own office. We've got a bunch of sensors, we've got dashboards, we've got charts, we've got, you name it, tell me about air quality. I looked at it for a week and it was exciting. It's not an active managed building, so it can't do anything on its own. It relies on me logging onto a portal, checking to see, is it okay in this office? No, it's not. Right, I'll go and open a window. I did that for about a week, 2 weeks, and then stopped doing it. Actually, what I want is, and you can get it to a certain degree, you can get an email that says, it's not good quality, open a window. I want to get to the stage, or I think the potential here with AI and machine learning here is that everything is just automated, and it just tells you. So you never need to look at the system until there's a problem, until it needs a human. And that's where it's intelligent enough to make the decisions, get a whole bunch of data sources and actually make the connections and chains to have complex understanding of the situation and then give you the relevant information to the relevant person at the right time. And I don't think we're that far away from that. I can't do that myself, but I don't think the smart people are that far away from that, perhaps.
And I think there's quite a lot in creating, so we talk about analysis tools, which software as a service, but also kind of systems that you're building to kind of offer to people. And then you need to sort of dumb it down almost so that everybody can use it, right? Because at the end there will be someone who can only use Excel very quickly, like me. So one option with some kind of LLMs and AI is to be able to ask questions from a large database which says, I want to know this, and then you get the answers. Or you get the dashboard set up in a way that actually gives you that. So maybe people setting up the data sets, but then kind of the end users not having to sort of tinker with it or really think about it, but just say, I want to know this, I want to know that.
There's still something about the interpretation and bringing things together and the interpretation. Things for us to look forward to. Well, I think we must be out of time. Yeah. So thank you all for coming. I hope you've been inspired to think about data in your retrofit projects. And I'm sure the speakers will be delighted to speak to you afterwards if you have particular interests. Thank you all for coming and thank you to our speakers.